Last night was the final Republican presidential primary debate of the year, not actually the last one. We will have one on January 14th in South Carolina. Going into last night's debate, Trump 33, Cruz 16, Rubio 13, Carson 12, Bush 4. No one else even had 3. Here with me to break down last night's debate is the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Benjamin Dixon. It's great to have you here.
Good to be here, David. Thanks so
You
much.
did watch the debate, right? I didn't even ask you. I just assumed you would have watched it.
Unfortunately, I had to watch it.
This debate, I thought, had some clear winners and some clear losers. And I'll talk about who I thought my winners were. But did you think someone stood out as doing particularly well?
You know, in terms of the context that they were doing it in,
Yeah.
I think Rand Paul did a great job. I don't think Donald Trump lost anything, but there were some clear losers.
Yeah.
But again, this is in the context of what they were performing, their performance last night.
Yeah, the bar was not particularly high for what it means to do well in a Republican debate. We have our segment producer, Noah Ferguson, pulled some clips overnight for us. And I want to go to the first one. I think Rand Paul did really well in this debate. And sometimes I joke that he sounds somewhat reasonable. He sounded far more reasonable than anybody else on that stage, even more than Kasich, in part because Kasich did not really get to speak very much. The first clip here is Rand Paul with a total takedown of Marco Rubio's disjointed foreign policy ideas. Let's take a look.
This has been a very big issue for you. You hear many of your colleagues are calling for increased surveillance by law enforcement. You call that hogwash. Why is that hogwash?
I think Marco gets it completely wrong here. We are not any safer through the bulk collection of all Americans' records. In fact, I think we're less safe. We get so distracted by all of the information, we're not spending enough time getting specific information on terrorists. The other thing is the one thing that might have stopped Senator Bernardino, that might have stopped 9/11, would have been stricter controls on those who came here. And Marco has opposed at every point increased security, border security for those who come to our country. On his Gang of Eight bill, he would have liberalized immigration, but he did not, and he steadfastly opposed any new border security requirements for refugees or students. Last week, I introduced another bill saying we need more security, we want more scrutiny. Once again, Marco opposed this. So Marco can't have it both ways. He thinks he wants to be this, oh, I'm great and strong on national defense, but he's the weakest of all the candidates on immigration. He is the one for an open border that is leaving us defenseless. If we want to defend the country, we have to defend against who's are coming in. And Marco has more of an allegiance to Chuck Schumer and to the liberals than he does to conservatives.
Yeah, so I don't agree with the policies that are connected to what Rand Paul is saying, but it was takedown after takedown, specifically informed about the policies that each candidate likes, and very good breakdowns, again, within the context that this is the Republican debate. I think this is the guy who can go the deepest of any of these candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Within the context, not agreeing with everything that he said, he hammered Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio did not have the capacity to come back.
And usually he either would go to wiping sweat off of his face, drinking water, or laughing, which is his common move. Ben Carson going about it a different way. Ben Carson opening the debate. First of all, there's nothing lower energy than having a moment of silence during your opening statement, right? Which is what Ben Carson did. But then the first time he was allowed to speak further, he complained about his speaking time. Let's look at that.
Marco still misunderstands the immigration issue.
Which I don't think is this, right?
What I put
I think
forward
we do have
was an amendment.
Let's see here. I believe we do. Let me just make sure I get this right here.
Marco still...
And that's not it either.
That's not it. No, that was Rand Paul.
I think this is it right here.
Okay, let's look.
What do you consider anti-American?
Well, first of all, let me just complain a little bit. This is the first time I've spoken, and several people have had multiple questions, so please try to pay attention to that.
Okay. Is this ever a good strategy? Because like when Ted Cruz criticizes the moderators, I think it's usually bogus, but he does it in a way where he doesn't come off as petty. I don't think that this was a good opening for Carson.
Yeah, Carson's complaining comes off as not only petty, but inept and weak.
Right.
Ted Cruz, as much as I dislike everything about him, at least he comes off bold. And again, that's within the Republican framework.
So let's get to actual comments from Ben Carson about policy. Ben Carson was asked what I thought was a really good question, which was, you talk about how much of a devout Seventh-day Adventist or Adventist you are. would you be able to adhere to your religion and deal with the inevitable thousands of casualties that would result from some of the military action you're suggesting? This was a great question. I don't think Ben Carson really answered it the first time through, but then he got upset with the follow-up, and the crowd got upset with the follow-up question. I think it was a fair follow-up, but let's take a look at the video.
Dr. Carson, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you're a pediatric neurologist surgeon. Neurosurgeon. And people admire and respect and are inspired by your life story, your kindness, your evangelical core support. We're talking about ruthless things tonight. Carpet bombing, toughness, war. And people wonder, could you do that? Could you order airstrikes that would kill innocent children by not the scores, but the hundreds and the thousands? Could you wage war as a commander-in-chief?
Well, interestingly enough, you should see the eyes of some of those children when I say to them, we're going to have to open your head up and take out this tumor. They're not happy about it, believe me. And they don't like me very much at that point. But later on, they love me. Sometimes I sound like him. Later on, they really realize what's going on. And by the same token, you have to be able to look at the big picture and understand that it's actually merciful if you go ahead and finish the job rather than death by 1,000 pricks.
So you are okay with the deaths of thousands of innocent children and civilians? It's like...
You got it. You got it.
That is what war...
Okay. I guess the criticism from the audience is it was sort of a gotcha, which is you're trying to get him to say, I don't care if 1,000 kids died. But it's a serious question, which is, fine, you're recognizing that there's a greater good in those thousands of deaths, but you're still okay with it. I thought it was a fair follow-up.
I think it was a fair follow-up, but I also think there was some validity to what Ben Carson answered, how he answered. It was a long way around to simply get to this one point. Let's finish the job right away instead of dying by 1,000 deaths.
So in other words, the follow-up was fair, but you think that he did sort of answer it in his initial answer, saying, sometimes doing the full thing is the right thing long term.
Yeah, absolutely. He just took entirely too long to get to that, and I think he lost everyone with opening up kids' heads. I don't know how that applied, but the last 5 words actually made sense to the question.
That's good. If he had skipped to the last 5 words, then he'd have saved everybody 90 seconds. Okay, let's go back to Rand Paul, who again I think had a very, very good night, although probably will not make any impact in the polls. Rand Paul asked about Donald Trump being a serious candidate. His takedown of Trump was fantastic. I don't think Trump supporters care, and here's Trump's follow-up as well.
I'd like to also go back to, though, another question, which is Donald Trump a serious candidate? The reason I ask this is if you're going to close the internet, realize, America, what that entails.
Yeah.
That entails getting rid of the First Amendment, okay? It's no small feat. If you are going to kill the families of terrorists, realize that there's something called the Geneva Convention we're going to have to pull out of. It would defy every norm that is America. So when you ask yourself, whoever you are that think you're going to support Donald Trump, think, do you believe in the Constitution? Are you going to change the Constitution?
Mr. Trump.
Yeah. So I thought that it was a very good takedown of Donald Trump, but I don't think anybody cares at this point. If you're supporting Trump at this point, you're not going to be thrown off your game because Rand Paul makes a couple of good points.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be a supporter of Donald Trump at this point and actually care about cogent arguments.
Exactly. That's exactly my thought. And so Rand Paul, as well as he did, I don't know who he can really score the points with, because he's not going to take away Trump supporters with logic and reminding people about the Bill of Rights.
Maybe that 16% that are in the poll from, I believe it was New York Times, that said that they are strongly against Donald Trump's Muslim policy.
Yeah.
Maybe that percentage.
One interesting moment, there was some thought that after the comments Ted Cruz was caught on video as having made about Donald Trump, that maybe Trump would go after Ted Cruz. Trump asked about Ted Cruz's temperament. He did not take the bait. Here's what he said.
I like that better, but we have to...
Who would be? I just can't imagine somebody
No,
booing.
this
These
was
are
a
people-
different clip. That's okay, though. That was when Trump started criticizing the crowd for booing, which is fine. Trump apparently just tells the crowd when they can and can't boo. He doesn't know why they're booing. Fine. Now let's go to the Trump comments on Cruz's temperament.
Dana, you have a question on this.
Mr. Trump, just this weekend, you said Senator Cruz is not qualified to be president because he doesn't have the right temperament and acted like a maniac when he arrived in the Senate. But last month, you said you were open to naming Senator Cruz as your running mate.
I did.
So why would you be willing to put somebody
Let me
who's a
just tell you,
maniac one heartbeat
but I've
away
gotten
from
to
the
know him over
presidency?
the last 3 or 4 days. He has a wonderful temperament. He's just fine. Don't worry about it.
Weird, right? I didn't get, I mean, it's, with everything that's been going on, I mean, is this Trump turning over a new leaf? I didn't really get it.
No, this is Trump's very manipulative way of marginalizing somebody with compliments, right? It's a very strategic move. You're a good guy. You're just not as good or as smart as me.
He's such not a threat to Trump.
Exactly.
That there's no risk whatsoever to Trump to just saying, this is a good guy. Don't worry about this guy. This is a good guy. That's interesting. I did not consider that. Last clip I want to play. Donald Trump was asked about his commitment to the Republican Party, and he said yesterday he would abide by that pledge he signed not to run as an independent. That made some news. Ben Carson's answer when asked about his commitment to the Republican Party was utterly insane, and I want to play that for you now.
Trump just committed to stay the distance regardless of the result. How about you?
Well, you know, the statement that I made last week that I would leave the party was contingent upon whether, in fact, the party acts like they have in the past with a lot of subterfuge and dishonesty, or like they're going to act now, because I spoke to Reince Priebus, and he assured me that the Washington Post
okay, we don't need to hear
writer
the rest.
had it.
So what was that answer? Was that, you know, depending on, you know, the Republican Party has done some stuff, but then sometimes they've done other stuff, and I might stay the course.
You have to be able to translate foolishness with Ben Carson, because buried in there was actually a decent answer. I would go independent if they continue doing what they're trying to do with a brokered convention.
Right.
This was in there, but you have to unwrap it from all of the other, you know, cut down your words, Ben Carson. Cut it down and say what you want to say. He and John Kasich really have a problem with saying too many words and their message getting completely lost.
Yeah, so, I watch it and I say, what point is he trying to make? I hear a lot of words, but I don't hear a lot of messages. So those were some of the highlights for me from last night's Republican debate.